Welcome to the Walkie-Talkies by Michelle Baharier. Part 6 is a collection of people's stories as children using Routemaster buses.
And I've been shopping with my mother, and it was the top deck of the bus, and I had a bag of marbles which I dropped because we had to hurry to get downstairs. It was a request stop, and we had to get downstairs before we got to the stop in order to be ready to request it to stop. And I remember thinking that it was quite difficult to negotiate the top, a double-decker bus from the top down, especially when you were small. It was quite scary experience.
Well, they were the Routemaster bus with the open platform on the back, and we always used to love going upstairs to sit at the front. That was our favourite spot, and my mum used to like going upstairs so she could have a cigarette as well.
I have a progressive impairment. It meant that as a child I was able to be ambulant and more mobile than I am today. So when I was much younger, I was able to get on a bus, but it was very, very difficult for me to actually to get up steps.
I remember going a long way. It was from Croxted Road in West Dulwich to Regent's Park to the zoo, the London Zoo, and I got off the bus at Crystal Palace Parade, and then I had to get the 137 bus down the hill. Well, it was somewhat, I knew about it already, and it was a very short journey anyway, and there was nothing special connected with it.
Go upstairs, and people used to smoke. When I was a kid, the upstairs of the bus was full of cigarette smoke, so you'd have all the smokers and all the kids.
One thing the conductors used to do for me and my sister when we were on the
used to get the bus
was they used to give us a
most
ticket
of the time,
of our
because
own.
none of us drove anywhere.
They'd give my mum her ticket,
My mum and
but
dad
then
didn't
they'd
have a
wind the
car
machine on
then.
again and give us tickets as well, me and my sister. Those machines were they were called the Gibson machine. And they used to make
I met quite a few people because I'm outgoing, but I do always remember when I was probably in my 20s, 30s, there was a guy, I don't know what his name was, but he was from Barbados, and he used to be a conductor on the number 12 bus. He was always immaculately dressed. He knew every single stop. He would say it. He was just so professional. You know, very often bus drivers, they don't know their route. They just don't know. They don't know the road. He knew everything in his head. He was such a professional. And I understand that when he died, they had a bus follow his coffin, number 12. He was that good. I can't remember his name, but he did his job with dignity and professionalism, which is a lot of some bus. He was always also very smart, pristine shirt, and he was just very good. And I think he was much more qualified, but because of racism, he ended up being a bus conductor in this country.
I can still remember that noise. It was sort of slightly rattly. Yes, it was quite exciting going on the buses, especially when we knew we were going to somewhere like St James's Park, because we'd be feeding the ducks there. And we used to get the bus to visit relatives in Tooting as well, which was always nice. And that was quite a long journey from where we lived. I don't remember the bus rovers being used by us, but one of my friends at primary school used to get those regularly, and he would travel all over London with those. But we weren't really allowed out on our own much, so we didn't use those.
Oh yes, yeah. Remember the conductors of the machines, and you used to have like a big purse they used to put their hand in and give you the change and things like that with, and wind it so the ticket come out. Oh yes, remember that. Yeah.
And then later on, as I became a young teenager, I was a wheelchair user, and so by that time I found that I was completely unable to use buses or most public transport.
I thought, and I was thinking these horrible thoughts about her, like, oh, in my head, like, oh, please, bug off, leave me alone, why you planted yourself next to me? And I was doing that for about 10 minutes, and I was wearing a Moggin Dovid, a little Moggin Dovid. And I must have had a really surly look on my face, but I wasn't really looking at her, I was just looking out the window, just wanting to be left alone. And about 10 minutes into the journey, and into my very unfriendly kind of demeanour, she leaned over and whispered in my ear, and she said, "Are you a Yiddisher girl?" And I said, yeah. And she got up, she leaned over and said in a really sweet way, "God bless you." And I felt so guilty. I thought, oh my God, I've sat there for 10 minutes just wanting her to get the hell away from me. Well, they were all Routemasters, all the buses. And she was so sweet to me, And anyway, I managed to get from Battersea back to Wembley.
Yes, it must have been when I was very small.
I didn't really know where I was going when I jumped on that
South
bus. I just kept
London,
asking people,
and used to get the bus to Brixton to do our shopping.
On the bus? And because I was 10,
and sometimes we'd go further afield to Trafalgar Square and up to
something strange. I do remember the smell of buses.
We started walking every day because my sister came along and she was in a pram.
Makes you
so
feel
we couldn't get that
cozy and warm when it's winter. And
I used the buses all the time when I went to school.
Because, instead of being cold, you want to stay there. And sometimes I thought, oh, I wish I could be on the bus until I get home. But that's when you feel comfortable, especially when it's late, when there's not so many people on the bus. So it makes you feel in some way as if you were at home, because you feel comfortable, because in some way there is
once I did when I went to
because there are
the
not
coronation
so many people, you are able to
of Queen Elizabeth II,
and then not feeling
on
anxious.
a route. Well, they were all Routemasters, all the buses then, weren't they? Had the open platform.
Yeah.
Because I won a ticket. I didn't know I'd won it. I threw my piece of paper away because it had a cross on it. And then the teacher said, "Mary, do you think I spent the whole evening putting crosses on all the things?" She said, "No, that was yours." And I said, "Oh, well, I don't really want to go." And then, no, it was raining, and my mother had given me a cushion to take that I could sit on, but it had a valve in it, and I dropped the valve down a tram line, so it was really horrible.
It was in a way because you had to pay each time you got off the bus. You paid another price. Yeah, it was. You didn't have a bus pass and it allowed you to get on and off. You had to each time, and especially when there was quite a few kids, it was really hard to get around. You know, my parents had 7 of us, but there was 6 because one of the younger ones autistic. So it's like getting bus fares or lunch money for those children. It's quite
transported apart. Sometimes it felt like we were going to market, tied down in rows, waving to the real world, sent away jolting and crying in the back of a mini, not a master bus. Not an urban pole dancer, baby. We don't want you in our face. Stay on the sunshine bus. You're not part of the Routemaster race.
To get sick because I couldn't any driving, even in the car, I used to get sickness. I remember holding on. I had to buy barley sweets and stuff that wanted to be sick.
The Walkie-Talkies project by Michelle Baharier is supported by Arts Council England National Lottery funding. Michelle Baharier wishes to thank Alex Zidane, Jennifer Fletcher, Kathy Waller, Disability Arts Online, and many others for their support to make the Walkie-Talkies.